looking up, and I was like, that doesn't look right. I was like, should that helicopter be doing that?
It hit cars and destroyed trees, caught fire, everything.
It just blew up. I mean, it just instantly. There was nothing could have been done.
We all watch the helicopter. It's still interesting and exciting to us every day, but today was much more horrifying, unfortunately.
It felt like a movie. It still feels like a movie.
For decades, all of us here, and at times you too, have depended on our news helicopter to help deliver breaking news and impressive video from above.
Just after 7:30 this morning, Air 4 became the news. Two members of the KOMO family, pilot Gary Fitzner and veteran photographer Bill Strothman, were killed when the chopper crashed shortly after taking off from its helipad here at Fisher Plaza.
It's a day of great shock and sadness in our building for our KOMO family and for the Seattle community. But as always, we're committed to bringing you the news today, as we would any day.
We have Team 4 coverage tonight on the deadly helicopter crash, from the witnesses to the survivors.
We begin with KOMO 4's Lindsay Cohen and the investigation into what went so horribly wrong. Lindsay?
Yeah, Dan, it'll be 5 days before we have the first pieces of that investigation, up to a year before we have the rest. This is the scene here tonight out on Broad Street, a street still being cleaned, a case without answers, a tough day all around.
Sirens and smoke darkened the early morning sky after a crash at the base of the space needle. When it cleared, 3 cars on the ground and the tail of a helicopter.
The propeller rolled over and it just boom, right in the middle of the street.
Eyewitnesses say the chopper made an unusual noise after it took off from the helipad atop Fisher Plaza. It rotated, pitched forward, then hit 3 cars on the street. The smoke was so intense, first responders didn't realize at first this was more than just a car crash.
They didn't even know as we arrived on scene that there was a helicopter in the midst of all these car fires, because not only were the cars on fire, but the fuel was going down the street on fire.
The drivers escaped from the cars on fire. 2 are uninjured. 1 has burns to 20% of his body. But some did not survive, including the helicopter pilot Gary Fitzner and photographer Bill Strothman, flying for KOMO 4 News, doing things they loved and had done for years.
We're looking at everything. We're looking at the environment, the weather, the pilot, the operators in the helicopter, as well as the helicopter itself, as well as the background of all of the above.
The NTSB has taken over the scene as it investigates what caused the crash. They moved the wreckage this afternoon to a hangar in Auburn. A preliminary report could be out as soon as 5 days from now. A full report could take a year. Until then, a community reels from a difficult day.
It didn't seem natural, and of course it wasn't. Boom, it was really an accident. It was tragic. It was very, very tragic.
Well, this, of course, happened around 7:40 this morning. The mayor remarking earlier today, had it been any later, this could have been much worse. Meantime, we can tell you maintenance records on that helicopter currently en route to Seattle, and the street here expected to reopen within the hour. Reporting live in Seattle tonight, I'm Lindsay Cohen, KOMO 4 News.
Lindsay, thank you. One of the things that will make the NTSB's job both more complicated and easier is how many witnesses saw the helicopter before and as it went down. KOMO 4's Tracy Vetter talked with some of those witnesses. She's live outside Fisher Plaza with their perspective. Tracy?
At 7:40 this morning, the block around this intersection was busy, filled with cars and pedestrians on their way to work. Many of those pedestrians on their way to KOMO 4 for work themselves, but having no idea they were about to witness a tragedy in our own family.
What people on the street realized right away is that the helicopter lifting off Fisher Plaza was having problems.
And the tail spun around a little bit. I don't know if it was a full 360, maybe a 180.
The engine sounded a little bit weird. The air, everything sounded a little bit weird. It all happened very fast. Whatever problem it encountered appeared to be very immediate.
Witnesses say in seconds the helicopter broke apart on the ground, then burst into flames.
It just blew up. I mean, it just instantly. There was nothing could have been done.
Inside KOMO's newsrooms, people watched in disbelief out windows and off balconies as the river of burning jet fuel rolled down Broad Street, torching cars trapped by the crash.
And there's just a moment where I have to do something. Can we go help them? And then you just see all the flames, and there's nothing you can do.
It's those sounds of the engines of the cars and the gas that's just ripping apart everything, and just literally you see explosion after explosion, and there was a trail of jet fuel.
Then the realization the crash they'd watched unfold took the lives of part of our KOMO family. Photographer Bill Strothman and pilot Gary Fitzner worked for Helicopters, Inc., but flew every morning for KOMO and King.
Now knowing who the photographer was, I worked with him forever.
This is tough for everybody here. We lost colleagues today, so I think that's the most important thing for everybody to remember.
And the NTSB knows how important witnesses can be in a case like this. They plan to talk to as many of them as possible. Reporting live at Fisher Plaza, Tracy Vetter, KOMO 4 News.
Thank you, Tracy. Today, KOMO not only lost co-workers, we lost friends.
KOMO 4's Eric Johnson is here to help our viewers get to know Bill Strothman, who spent nearly 30 years as a photographer in our newsroom. Eric?
Oh, what a day, you guys, what a day. Those of us who got a chance to work with and know Bill Strothman are very lucky indeed. He usually had some whiskers of some kind on his face, an easy smile, and a genuine, gentle passion for the business of exploring hearts and lives through the lens of a camera.
Bill Strothman loves stories and pictures and people, not in that order. For almost 30 years, he carried around a camera and a smile, and he told stories, beautiful stories that he took pride in, and we took pride in them too. He shot these pictures. This is vintage Bill Strothman.
The best.
84th and TMB, affirmative, in Totem Lake.
If Rick Talley answers your call,
okay, no sweat.
You're in luck.
He's the guy who let you see his heart. I guess that's the way to describe Bill.
He's a great photographer. He's a great storyteller. He feels it in his heart. He sees it in his eyes. He thinks it in his head. And I miss him already. I miss him. I just can't fathom it. I just can't fathom it.
He shot this video. Clean, sharp, creative. You only get stuff like this because you love it. Bill was damn good. He roamed the streets and roads and skies of our region with a camera on his shoulder for 28 years. He was our eyes and your eyes. He had a feel. Bill Strothman had a great feel for the business.
Oh, there. Woo! Here it is, Wesley.
Bill, hold on. Unchanged.
I saw a picture of him on KOMO News this morning with a big smile on his face. And I thought, that's how I remember him. That's the way he was.
Perhaps his greatest compliment to the news business and brotherhood is that he allowed his son Dan to follow in his footsteps as a KOMO TV videographer.
Yeah, seeing him definitely inspired me to get into it, for sure. And the telling people's stories was definitely one of my main motivators. And I'm not nearly as good as my dad. Like, I never will be, but I still am doing what I love.
Bill liked to talk about his craft, to get into the guts of a story. He loved the give and take of the photographer-reporter relationship. If Bill told you it was good, that it touched a part of him, then you could believe it was good.
When he would do these stories, he was such a kind person, such a great human, that he was able to find the human connection in everything he did.
He was involved in his church. He was involved in his community. He was a man of principle. Everybody knew that. Always with a grin, a twinkle in his eye, something thoughtful to say.
But he liked going around the world with World Vision, with the Lutheran Church, and being in third world countries, helping those who really need help, and his pictures really told the story. And Bill really loved to be out in the world and in the community, and is really going to be missed by all of us.
He leaves behind his wife Nora, his daughter Heidi, his son Dan, and of course his other family here at KOMO.
My heart is just shredded. Bill was more than a photographer. He was more than a journalist. He was a friend I'd known for 20 plus years. And my heart is just shredded today.
A couple years ago, Bill retired. But when it's in your blood, when you love cameras and stories and people, you can't stay away. And so he didn't. He came back to fly in Air 4 for a little extra cash and a little extra adrenaline. It was like a homecoming every time he worked these last few years. It felt like home.
How do I think Bill wants to be remembered? As a guy who loved what he did, who was passionate not only about journalism, but about his family, about life, as somebody who made a difference, and as somebody who was a friend.
In addition to flying in Air 4 the past few years, Bill worked on some documentaries and started a production company called Glass Mountain Video. Bill's decency and compassion were kind of a constant in the KOMO universe. He was easy, calm, comfortable, and of course, it goes without saying, we're going to miss him horribly.
A kind man, a good friend, and a great dad.
Yeah,
Thanks,
all
Eric.
those things.
We also felt a close bond with our chopper pilot, Gary Fitzner, and he felt a connection with you, the viewer. And talk about a guy who loved what he did. He loved to fly. KOMO 4's Mark Miller is live outside Fisher Plaza to tell us more about our colleague and our friend. Mark?
I want to show all of you something happening outside of our studios on Fisher Plaza. Our viewers sharing with us their condolences, sharing with us this grief, dropping off flowers and cards. This one addressed to Gary, and we just had this. This is from a pilot who graduated from the same flight school as Gary. You know, I can tell you that listening to a few people that know him best, you'll get a sense that you knew him too. He was devoted to three things: flying, building airplanes, and his family.
So proud to be a pilot, he brought his mom and dad down to see where he works. And his entire family was extremely proud of him.
We just can't believe he's gone.
3 of Gary's 6 siblings want to share with you what kind of a man he was. First and foremost, devoted to his wife and 2 grown boys, close to the entire clan.
To me, he was a very dear brother, and he just always tried to take care of us.
Gary Fitzner put himself through flight school, became an instructor pilot, a guy you trust to take you up. We all did, and admired his devotion to gathering the day's news for all of you.
When he tried to do his best reporting for people and giving them pictures and trying to help people that were watching the news every morning.
And after flying in the morning, Gary would go to his full-time job as a composites expert, building planes for Boeing.
He had that same passion.
A colleague and close friend described first learning there'd been a crash.
I said, my God. And I actually sent Gary a text message. Gary, I heard there was an accident. Are you okay? And we know the answer.
While the grief is overwhelming, Gary's brother told me it is a small consolation to know Gary was able to live his dream of soaring through the sky.
He really did love to fly, and he did something that, if you're going to go, it's always best to do it what you love the most.
Today I talked to pilots across the country. I talked to other news photographers. All of them say that Gary was an incredibly talented pilot, dedicated to safety. His family says that he was going to celebrate his 60th birthday this December. They were planning the big 6-0 party. Gary, we all love you, and we'll miss you. Back to you.
Mark, thank you very much. The injured driver who was trapped in his burning car has been upgraded to serious condition. 38-year-old Richard Newman got out of the vehicle on his own, but it took 90 seconds from the time the fire started. When he emerged, his clothes were on fire. A security guard at Fisher Plaza tackled him to put out the flames. Newman suffered 2nd and 3rd-degree burns on 20% of his body. He's in the intensive care unit at Harborview Medical Center. We'll hear from the security guard who helped save his life. That's coming up at 6:30.
Tonight, our hearts ache for the families of Gary Fitzner and Bill Strothman, and our prayers go to the family of the man in his car who was burned, Richard Newman. We wish him so well. We didn't know him, but we sure hope things turn out well for him. 4 people in their cars had a harrowing front row seat to the crash. They knew the chopper was in trouble, but only one of those 4 vehicles had time to move out of the way. KOMO 4's Michelle Esteban has more on their stories tonight. Michelle?
Well, Dan, they saw the chopper coming right at them, and one of the witnesses told me he could actually see the pilot in the chopper struggling, and he's confident that he was trying to get the chopper across the street into the lawn at the Seattle Center, but as we all sadly know, he just couldn't.
Some of us are lucky to be alive today.
Pete Williams said he'll never forget the images that led up to this final moment. He saw everything from his driver's seat, just 4 car lengths back from where the chopper crash landed.
Debris was flying, a piece of it hit my car, Saw it coming, so my carpool partner and I both ducked down below the dashboard, and then it glanced off my car.
The Washington State ferry captain was just 1 block from work when his carpool buddy and coworker, Donna Wharton, first noticed trouble.
Road, and I was looking up, and I was like, that doesn't look right. I was like, should that helicopter be doing that? I was like, something looks off, and then he's like, no, it shouldn't, and then right then it just came down and it hit.
Williams said the chopper nosedived off our rooftop launch pad. He could see the pilot struggling to correct it.
It was unstable. It was pitching and going up and down.
It was like its tail wobbled, so it did like a couple tail spins, and then the nose was coming down a little bit more, and then it just swooped down and hit.
Pete slammed on his brakes to back up. He and Donna ran to a woman whose car was damaged by the debris and on fire. She blamed herself for making a coffee run, insisting normally she wouldn't have been at this spot. On the other side of the crash site, a driver, likely uncertain of what happened behind her, bolts from her car and then runs back to drive to a safer spot. Dozens of witnesses watched in horror as a man on fire runs for cover. Flames from the crash charred every inch of his pickup.
His jacket's on flames, he's on fire, he's trying to get it out, he's rolling on the floor, and then I see firemen helping him get it out.
Pete Williams speaks for so many that it's worth repeating.
Some of us are lucky to be alive today.
Lucky indeed. In fact, the woman who you saw running from the SUV, the chopper, fell right behind her vehicle. On Facebook today, she expressed just how thankful she is that someone was looking out for her. We are thankful too. Back to you.
Thank you, Michelle. The helicopter in today's accident was a Eurocopter AS-350 owned by Helicopters Incorporated out of St. Louis. The model is used by several television stations all over the country. The manufacturer also recommends it for hospitals and police departments. Here's a picture of the chopper that crashed today. KOMO and King have a joint agreement to lease it from Helicopters Incorporated. This is not the helicopter you normally see us use. Helicopters Incorporated is outfitting that one with a new camera, and we were using this one in the interim.
City leaders have also been sharing their condolences on the tragic crash this morning. We heard kind words from Seattle Fire Chief Gregory Dean and Police Chief Harry Bailey, as well as Mayor Ed Murray.
On behalf of Seattle, I want to express my deepest condolence to the families of both the victims and to all their colleagues at KOMO. Our thoughts and prayers are with you during this incredible, difficult moment.
All 3 men also stopped by the KOMO 4 studios this morning to share their condolences to us and the victims' families as well. Governor Jay Inslee released this statement about the crash. This morning, 2 members of the KOMO News family were killed in a tragic crash. Trudy and I send our condolences to their families and to the men and women at KOMO who, despite the personal impacts of this tragedy, have been reporting on this loss with impressive professionalism and grace. Our hearts go out to you. This has been a difficult day for a lot of us as we grieve the loss of 2 wonderful co-workers and friends. As we continue to mourn, we will bring you the newest developments on this tragedy. We'll have much more coming up at 6:30 as well as tonight at 11 o'clock. And remember, you can also follow updates on KOMO News Radio, KOMOnews.com, and by following KOMO News on Twitter and Facebook. Elderly and disabled residents are finally back in their Hoquiam apartments after a 26-day-long evacuation. KOMO 4's Keith Eldridge reports a fire sounded the alarm, but it was the water that forced them out.
This 90-year-old historic building is a welcome sight for the 60 residents who had to get out, leaving most everything behind. A small fire last month in a trash can in the 5th floor apartment was quickly extinguished by the water sprinklers. But a maintenance worker mistakenly kept the water flowing.
It put out the fire, and then the water all came down the hall.
Down the hall, down the walls, into the ceilings and rooms of the floors down below.
When I got up, I noticed the holes in the ceiling, and the carpet was soaked, and there was water on the kitchen floor.
Emerson Manor was so wet, it was deemed unsafe. Everybody had to evacuate and stay in motels or with family the past 4 weeks. But today, everyone is back.
This is sure a welcome sight. There was a lot of water damage. A lot of the beds had to be thrown away. Well, here come the new ones right in there, okay?
New mattresses and box springs were donated and delivered to ease the transition back for residents such as Joe Bryant and his constant companion.
That's my dog. That's my Smokey.
And for Rachel Parks.
Dry and no water damage, and
I'm happy. I'm very happy.
And Charlene Blackwell, who got an automated welcome.
Time to test your lifeline.
Oh, no. Already? I just got home.
Her Lifeline alert found that she's very much alive and glad to be home.
I'm excited to be back home. I loved it at my son's house. I got used to it, but nothing's like home. Absolutely, there's no place like home.
Dorothy couldn't have said it any better. In Hoquiam, Keith Eldridge, KOMO 4 News.
A fundraiser for the residents of the Emerson is being held this Saturday at noon at the Hoquiam Masonic Ballroom.
Passenger rail service is on hold between Seattle and Everett because of yet another mudslide. A 20-foot-long slide hit the tracks just south of Everett early today. The mud, rocks, and trees have already been cleared from the tracks, but under federal guidelines, Amtrak and Northline Sounder trains will not be allowed to run again until at least Friday morning. Buses will be available to get passengers around.
Let's check in now with Shannon, who's filling in for Steve tonight. Spring is literally just around the corner now.
It is just a day and a half away or so, and we needed that drier break the last couple of days so that super saturated ground can dry out a little bit better. See fewer mudslides out there, hopefully here around the corner. Another weak disturbance on deck. That one's not going to bring much rain. Right now we have just a fleecy blanket of gray over downtown Seattle. Struggled to hit 50 in most spots today. We're still just barely there at SeaTac. Winds are calm and no rain in the gauge falling out of that low overcast. There is a light pitter-patter, a very light rainfall sitting out over the Olympic Peninsula. You can see there over the strait and then back down toward Hood Canal. We're seeing some of those scattered showers, including through Port Angeles tonight. Temperatures currently in the mid to the upper 40s in the cooler spots, like around Friday Harbor, where it's 47, 52 apiece for Olympia and Tacoma, and it's 47 right now in Everett and Mukilteo. Satellite picture shows the last disturbance of the winter rolling in our direction. Rain overnight tonight, maybe some thunder and lightning tomorrow, and then a good coating of mountain snow Wednesday into Thursday over the Cascades. The higher peak's going to pick up about 1.5 feet of fresh powder as we slide into the next couple of days. Overnight tonight, increasing clouds and increasing chance for light rain. Most of us seeing that wet pavement tomorrow morning. Behind the front tomorrow, a few sun breaks, but also the chance for some showers or thunder showers. A little bit of hail possible too for the final winter afternoon. Temperatures back on either side of 50 tomorrow, and the pass is going to see again some good snow with the snow level down to 3,000 feet. Eastern Washington, including Wenatchee, starting to feel more like spring with a milder 54. The new season finally does ring in on Thursday morning just before 10 o'clock. Still a little chilly with some scattered showers Thursday afternoon, but Friday and Saturday looking calmer and brighter for the first weekend of spring 2014.
All right, Shannon. Always a joy to have Shannon here. I just wanted to mention very quickly, Steve was in the newsroom today and really wanted to be here today to express his condolences to the families of the Strothmans and the Fitzners. But Steve has a family emergency. His dad is not doing well, so Steve decided to leave, and we're glad to have Shannon here. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Coming up, just how widespread is the data breach at the Archdiocese of Seattle?
Consumer Problem Solver Connie Thompson is hearing from more upset victims as they discover their identities have been stolen for tax ID fraud. Important information on what's being done and what to do if you're a victim of tax ID theft.
We're hearing more from local families whose Social Security information was stolen from the database at the Archdiocese of Seattle.
Many of them still aren't sure what to do now that thieves have filed taxes in their name. Consumer Problem Solver Connie Thompson has the 4 steps everyone needs to take if you're a victim of tax ID theft.
People connected with the Seattle Archdiocese are still reeling at learning the data breach may extend to personal information collected years ago. The attack marks the latest in a nationwide threat of tax ID theft, where imposters hijack your identity to file tax returns and collect fraudulent refunds.
On my Facebook page, I'm friends with a lot of people in a lot of different parishes, and it was just blowing up with,
"Oh my gosh, I've been compromised."
And I called. The IRS just got on hold, and suddenly I discovered that I had
a tax filing that I didn't do.
It's why the IRS urges all of us to file as soon as possible. The truth is, with data breaches exposing millions of accounts without notice, any of us could be compromised. As soon as you discover someone's filed taxes as you, call the IRS or go to the Internal Revenue Service website and find the section on ID theft protection. You'll find a link to a special form you need to complete. It's called an Identity Theft Affidavit. Then go to the Federal Trade Commission website, click on Tips and Advice for a drop-down menu, and then click for consumers. That's where you'll learn how to place a fraud alert on your credit reports, how to check your credit reports to monitor future activity, and how to file an identity theft report with the FTC. So make a list, an IRS ID theft affidavit. You'll also need a police report case number from local law enforcement, fraud alerts with the credit bureaus, and an ID theft report with the Federal Trade Commission. For the Problem Solvers, I'm Connie Thompson.
The Catholic Archbishop just posted an updated alert letter on the Archdiocese website today, and you can find more information about dealing with tax ID theft on the consumer page of KOMOnews.com. Next, a dark day for KOMO and Seattle as two of our co-workers are killed in a helicopter crash.
Our Team 4 coverage continues with the heroic actions of a security guard to save one of the victims on the ground. We'll be right back.
Oh my God.
Tragedy, shock, and heartbreak for the city of Seattle and our KOMO family with the deadly crash of our TV news helicopter Air 4. It has been a very difficult day for us as we bring you this news.
Our news helicopter crashed this morning onto Broad Street, right outside Fisher Plaza. The NTSB responded to the scene and says a preliminary report into the cause of the accident could come in 5 days. Investigators will look into a number of possibilities, including potential mechanical failure or that the rotor may have hit the tail. We lost two of our colleagues in the crash, pilot Gary Fitzner and photographer Bill Strothman. Bill's son, Dan, is also a photographer here at KOMO News.
He was one of the nicest men ever and just so loved and respected because he was a great photographer, but he was just a great person.
3 cars on Broad Street were also hit. 2 people escaped unharmed.
One security guard at Fisher Plaza ran toward the inferno and helped a man in that car who was on fire. Tonight, that driver is at Harborview Medical Center in serious condition. KOMO 4's Luke Ducey is there with more on the victim and the hero who helped save him. Luke?
Yeah, right now, Richard Newman, the victim, is in the intensive care unit here at Harborview. He suffered burns on 20% of his body. We're told on his lower back, his arms, and in his torso. He was on fire this morning until that security guard from Fisher Plaza ran up to him, tackled him, and put those flames out.
That could have been our building. Holy
Home video recorded seconds after impact from atop a construction crane. Flames stretched the length of Broad Street. Then, moments later,
he's alive. He's on fire.
Somehow, 38-year-old Richard Newman emerged from his car, his clothes on fire, and right there you can see Fisher Plaza security guard Brian Post ran after him.
I used my hand at first and then his jacket just to get the flames out.
Brian, a former police officer, tells me he tackled Newman to the ground, the heat from the wreckage unbearable.
There was a lot of popping and small explosions.
Next, he knelt by Newman's side, comforting him until paramedics arrived.
No, I tried to talk to him and he wasn't responsive. He was breathing, kind of struggling.
The burns that he suffered are 2nd and 3rd degree.
Harborview spokesperson Susan Gregg says Newman suffered burns on 20% of his body. The impact and explosion also cut his head and broke his rib. His family rushed here from Bellingham.
And he's got family here and his partner, so, they're here. They are obviously shocked, just like everybody else.
From the time Air 4 crashed to the time Newman escaped his car, about 1.5 minutes passed. That's right. He sat trapped inside his burning vehicle 90 long seconds.
It was pretty intense.
Brian rushed to the scene to help, but never expected anyone could survive. Many might consider him a hero for helping the victim, but for Brian, the victim miraculously saved himself.
It was just a will to survive, to get out of the car and get away from the flames. That was it.
Richard Newman worked for the King County Public Health Department, which released a statement today saying, "We send our thoughts and heartfelt wishes to Richard, his family, and loved ones on his road to recovery, as well as our deepest condolences to the families of the others our community lost today, including Bill Strothman and Gary Fitzner." As far as Newman, his family and his partner, we're told, are at his bedside tonight. Live at Harborview, Luke Ducey, KOMO 4 News.
Luke, thank you very much. Several others in the area escaped their brush with death without any injuries. Pete Williams and Donna Wharton were 4 car lengths back from where the helicopter crash landed. They watched in horror as the pilot tried to stabilize the chopper before it nosedived from our rooftop helipad.
It was unstable. It was pitching and going up and down.
Its tail wobbled, so it did like a couple tail spins, and then the nose was coming down a little bit more, and then it just swooped down and hit.
Williams says he believes the pilot was trying to get the chopper in a grassy area to avoid cars, but was unable to adjust.
The helicopter came down right in front of people who were going to work or just starting their day. As you can imagine, it was a shocking sight to see.
I heard the crash, boom, and it took like 2 seconds for the flames to burst out because it broke first, like it cracked in half.
Many of our KOMO co-workers saw the tragedy unfold from their desks and the windows of the building here at Fisher Plaza and felt helpless.
There's just a moment where I have to do something. Can we go help them? And then you just see all the flames and there's nothing you can do.
The National Transportation Safety Board plans to talk to as many witnesses as possible as it pieces together what happened.
Seattle's mayor is pledging a full review of the city's policies allowing helicopter takeoffs and landings in the downtown area. KOMO's helipad is one of 12 in Seattle that have been permitted to operate since the mid-1980s. City policy allows helipads to be used only for emergency, medical, and news gathering purposes.
We need to look at it. We will look at it and, in consultation with council, decide if we need to adjust our current policies regarding helicopters.
The city has been reducing the number of helipads because of safety and noise concerns. The city won't take action until the NTSB releases its findings.
So many people spot a TV news helicopter in the air and it grabs their attention. It somehow holds a special place in the civic landscape. KOMO 4's Jeff Burnside is live in the Satellite Center with that part of the story tonight. Jeff?
Well, TV news helicopters became popular in the late 70s, early 80s. Then they added live gyro cameras with incredible lenses. Despite risk, they continue to be a fascinating yet indispensable part of gathering the news.
They're quite possibly the most visible, highest profile fleet of aircraft around, constantly flying over cities and towns.
When I see them, I generally just think, oh, they're going to, get the story for tonight's news, and I'm going to, I'm seeing them go into it right now, and I'm going to be able to hear about it on the news tonight or in the morning.
Covering everything from Orca.
Wow, look at all the spray. It's
waterfalls, riots, to Seahawk victory parades.
Tools of the trade.
And promoted heavily by TV stations in Seattle.
Sky 4.
And around the country. They feel like part of the news team.
Has 2 copters.
I mean, when you see it, it just, it's home. It's part of Seattle. It's part of Washington.
Living in a big city, it gets kind of lonely sometimes, and so it's sort of a friendly face flying around.
YouTube reminds us news choppers have been around for decades.
Channel 15 and Channel 3 just had a mid-air collision.
While covering a car chase in Phoenix in 2007, 2 news helicopters collided while broadcasting.
We're going to pull out. We don't
From a crash landing in New York in which everyone survived.
Another station's chopper.
To a smoky emergency landing in Los Angeles. In 1995, 2 died when a Crem 2 chopper crashed in Spokane.
That ominous warning came from 25.
In 1980, a KOMO plane and a Cairo chopper collided. Both landed safely. So did Cairo's chopper in 1999 after colliding with an aircraft over Lake Washington. They are high-profile news cameras in the sky, so often in challenging circumstances covering the news.
In recent years, some TV stations have begun sharing helicopters and sometimes leasing them instead of owning them outright. In the future, well, there is talk about drones becoming part of the news gathering tool. In Satellite Center, Jeff Burnside, KOMO 4 News.
Thank you, Jeff. As you can imagine, there have been a lot of tears and a lot of hugs in the KOMO newsroom today. We have a strong team here, and I think that's one of the reasons it hurts so much that we lost 2 team members. But it also helps that we are able to pull together. But what also really, really helps is the support we have been getting from you today. Your thoughts in email, phone calls, social media messages. I've been swamped. I know everybody in our newsroom has. We cannot say enough how much it means to us that you are thinking about us and praying for us and really understanding our loss today. So thank you so much.
It makes a huge difference.
It does, absolutely.
As we mourn the loss of 2 members of our KOMO family, we will continue to bring you the newest developments in this tragic helicopter crash. Watch for live team coverage tonight at 11 o'clock. Remember, you can also follow updates at KOMO News Radio, KOMOnews.com, and by following KOMO News on our Twitter and Facebook page.
Stocks moved higher for a second straight day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 88 points to close at 16,336. A surge in Microsoft stock helped the Nasdaq jump 53 points to 4,333. The S&P 500 finished 13 points higher at 1,872. Years of drought conditions in California and Texas likely mean you will pay more for groceries this year. Federal forecasters estimate food prices will go up as much as 3.5% this year. That would be the biggest annual increase in 3 years. The droughts are already blamed for pushing the price of beef to record highs over the past few months.
Walmart is getting into the used video game business. Starting next week, customers can trade in used games for gift cards that can be used in-store as well as online. The games will be refurbished and resold as certified pre-owned. The program will be in direct competition with similar practices at stores like GameStop, Best Buy, and Target. The unrest in Ukraine took another turn today.
Next, the comments from Vice President Joe Biden as Russia starts tightening its grip on Crimea.
Daredevils caught on camera. The dangerous game some people played with a speeding train.
Despite strong urging from the Western world, today, Russian President Vladimir Putin began the process of taking control of Crimea, although the West urged him not to. Putin signed a document to formally annex the Crimean Peninsula of the Ukraine. Yesterday, President Obama froze assets and banned travel to the U.S. for 7 Russian officials. The European Union imposed similar sanctions. Nearly 98% of the people in Crimea reportedly voted Sunday to join Russia. Vice President Joe Biden says the vote doesn't justify what he calls a land grab.
It's a simple fact that Russia's political and economic isolation will only increase if it continues down its current path.
Biden warned Russia with even more sanctions. Next week, President Obama and his G7 partners will meet at a previously planned summit in Europe.
Territorial integrity.
A review of last year's deadly shooting at the Washington Navy Yard says the biggest threats to Defense Department employees may come from trusted insiders. An independent study was ordered after Navy contractor Aaron Alexis killed 12 workers at the Navy Yard last year. Investigators say the Pentagon needs to beef up internal security and reduce the number of employees with security clearance. Investigators also say the company that employed Alexis should have told the Navy about problems they had with him months before the shooting.
A man in California had a close call with a speeding train, and it appears he did it on purpose. Surveillance video shows a group of people running across the railroad tracks in Redwood City, even though the warning lights were flashing. Wow, one last man made a run for it and just got across the tracks seconds before the express train came barreling through the intersection. The train system says it released this video, to urge people to stay away from warning gates.
That could have been a very different story to tell.
Man.
Let's turn our attention to Shannon O'Donnell, who's in for Steve. I guess the clouds kind of lingered all day today.
Yeah,
Shannon.
they're lingering on this side of the Cascades in eastern Washington and Oregon. It looks a little bit brighter tonight. We're looking at a shot here of the Columbia Gorge with a soft orange glow there over the mighty Columbia. I have a friend that always says the angels are baking cookies when the sun set looks like this. And on a day like this at KOMO, we certainly like to think that's the case. A look right now over the satellite and radar picture. You can see the light rain starting to enter on in here for the final stretch of winter. It's almost over. A little bit of light rain coming in overnight and greeting us for the morning commute. So look for plenty of wet pavement tomorrow morning. Sun comes up at 7:14 now, and temperatures will start mainly in the low 40s. For tomorrow afternoon, we could be rocked by a couple of thunder showers with some hail, so keep that in mind. Temperatures barely scratching into the low 50s again like they did today. A little bit breezy, too, over the sound with southwesterly winds 15 to 35 miles per hour. Spring does officially arrive Thursday morning just before 10 o'clock. So a little cool and showery that day, but the first weekend of the new season, finally a drier and brighter weekend, calmer than the last 6 in a row have been. They've all been stormy. Temps should make it well into the 50s both Saturday and Sunday.
A nice change of pace. Thank you.
Mike has sports next.
Well, it was never a matter of if, but when regarding Ken Bone getting fired as WSU head basketball coach. Bone was let go today by Cougar Athletic Director Bill Moose on the heels of his worst season at the helm of the Cougar program. The Cougs finishing 10-21 were bounced out of the first round of the Pac-12 tournament last week. Interest in the Cougar basketball program virtually non-existent. Only 5,200 people total showed up for the Cougars' final 2 home games. Things clearly need to change on all fronts. Bone is done after 5 seasons on the Palouse. After reaching the NIT semis in his second season, he was 80 and 86 overall. Pac-12 record really bad, 28 and 61. He will still get paid the remaining $1.7 million on his contract. Hisashi Iwakuma has not thrown a pitch all spring. He's been recovering from a strained tendon in his middle finger for the past 5 weeks. He has seen a hand specialist, and he has healed up enough to begin throwing this week. He'll start with a tennis ball, then gradually move up to a baseball. Iwakuma is a major part of the Mariners' rotation now. Along with building up his arm strength, he has to build up his overall physical endurance. It could take a full month or so before he even gets back into that rotation. And the happy, amazing story of Hank the dog continued today in Milwaukee, where this line of people gathered at Miller Park this morning. They were there to meet Hank the pup, who now has his own line of T-shirts at Miller Park. Hank, of course, is a stray dog in Arizona that found a home at the Brewers training facility, was adopted by the Brewers players, and adopted by a family in Milwaukee, where he is now the official dog for Brewer baseball. I'm just waiting for Hank to make the top 100 celebrities list on the Pupple magazine. What a pup. We'll be right back.
Our hearts are truly broken by the loss of our 2 co-workers in the crash of Air 4 today. We cannot express how much we appreciate your support and for paying attention to this story and knowing how much it means to us. Thank you so much. We'll be back tonight with updates on KOMO 4 News at 11.
We'll see you then.